The fantasy landscape for quarterbacks might have changed forever after the 2023 fantasy football season. We are going to break down the top 12 quarterbacks for fantasy football this year on today's episode of the Fantasy Football Fellas podcast. Welcome in, Lucas, Tyler, Plath hanging out with you today. No Cameron. He is out. He is taking care of other responsibilities. He has family in town. Family man. We are a family show here at the Fantasy Football Fellas. We are backing that up by allowing maybe our least beneficial employee to go spend time with his family, but we are backing it up nonetheless. Cameron would say the same thing about me. You know he would.
No, and me too. It's all we throw it at each other because we like to razz each other a little bit.
We wouldn't be friends if it weren't for our razzing. If we didn't razz each other, I don't think I'd be friends with either of you two, honestly. I'll be perfectly honest.
Yeah, you're kind of boring if you don't, so that's, yeah.
I'm not friends with anybody who doesn't make fun of me. That's actually like one of my top gauges of can I be friends with this person? Can they handle my jokes? Because if they can, great, we're going to be great friends. If they can't, then I don't know. Maybe we won't be that great of friends. That has nothing to do with the top 12 quarterbacks from 2023, though, in fantasy football. Hey, if you're new to the YouTube channel, thanks for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe, turn on those notifications as well. You'll be alerted when all of our new content is going up. We're still posting content all off season long. We're going to start taking a turn to Dynasty here in the next few weeks. Not next week, but the week after. We're going to start turning to a lot of Dynasty content this offseason, a lot of NFL draft content. Tyler, you came out with a mock draft 1.0 on the YouTube channel yesterday. So we are going to be doing NFL draft stuff, Dynasty stuff all off season long. If you have any interest in that, make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel and the podcast as well. Thank you for our loyal listeners over there. Look, we got 12 quarterbacks to cover today, Ty. It is honestly an ugly list. We'll see how long we need to spend on some of these quarterbacks. Some of them were surprisingly really good and shocking this year. There were others where it's like we really shouldn't spend more than 1 minute talking about them. So let's not waste any more time. Let's dive on in, break down the top 12 quarterbacks, the good, the bad, and the ugly from the 2023 fantasy football season. So in our past episodes, we broke down the top 10, top 20, 15. My gosh, I can't pick the right number. The top 15 running backs, top 15 wide receivers. We did that in our two previous podcast episodes. My goodness. Can't talk today. If you haven't seen those already, make sure you go check that out on our podcast profile, YouTube channel, wherever it may be. Also, happy day one of Senior Bowl to those of you who celebrate out there. Technically day 2 by the time you see this, but when Tyler and I are recording on Tuesday here, January 30th, day 1 of Senior Bowl. You're having a blast today.
Oh, it should be a national holiday, honestly. And it's great because you get to actually watch these prospects go 1v1 in team drills and stuff like that. And you really get to see who, smaller school or maybe not such a big name get an opportunity to kind of showcase their stuff that when come draft time, hey, this guy maybe started off as a day 3 pick, might find himself on day 2, maybe day 1 even, because of how well he showcases talents.
Tyjae Spears, a name that comes to mind from last year at the Senior Bowl, now in line to be the starting running back for the Tennessee Titans in the 2024 season. So, if you're not tracking any Senior Bowl stuff, it's worth tracking. It's not the end-all, be-all for a lot of these guys. Obviously, you still have the combine. You still have their actual collegiate careers that we have to, watch film on and keep track of their stats as well. But happy Senior Bowl day to all of you out there who choose to celebrate. Let's dive into the quarterbacks, though, Ty. In our running back and wide receiver videos, we went backwards from 15 to 1. Let's just start at the top for this one, because really, for the quarterbacks, starting at the bottom means we have to waste a lot of time.
True.
and those are the guys I want to talk the least about. I want to talk about the greatness of, really these top 5, 6 quarterbacks this year. And number one, the quarterback one overall this year was Josh Allen. The good, the bad, and the ugly of Josh Allen. Josh Allen has finished as a quarterback 1-3 of the last 4 years. And last year he didn't finish as a quarterback one. Ty, want to take a guess at where he finished?
Quarterback 2.
Yeah, he's a quarterback too. Still a top 2 guy. So even though he wasn't the quarterback 1 last year, he was still the quarterback 2. He had 15 rushing touchdowns this year. Okay, that was a huge boost to his production. Through his first 5 years in the league, 8 touchdowns, 9 rushing touchdowns, 8, 6, 7. Nearly doubled his average over the first 5 years of his career. Now the bad, we got to dive into the bad because this is a reality with Josh Allen. Unfortunately, this isn't an issue that he's yet solved. He had the lowest touchdown to interception ratio of his career since his rookie season. He had 29 touchdowns to 18 interceptions this year. That was the lowest ratio again since his rookie season. And the ugly, again, we're gonna focus on his turnovers here. Is his 18 career interceptions were career high. And it continues to be a problem for him. He was second in interceptable passes this year amongst all quarterbacks. I like a quarterback who's willing to drive the ball downfield, who's willing to put it in tough windows, who's willing to put it in harm's way, because I do think that is a sign of a good quarterback who's willing to take those risks. However, with Josh Allen, this is an issue that has been a thing now for 2.5, almost 3 years now, where interceptions and turnover worthy plays have been a problem for him, but it hasn't prevented him from being the number 1 overall quarterback in fantasy football because he gets it done with his legs. Going into next season, Josh Allen is no question going to be my number 1 overall quarterback in fantasy football. He is also currently my number 1 quarterback in dynasty formats as well. The level of consistency he's been giving you the last 4 years is quite literally unparalleled.
There's not much else that I really can and want to add when it comes to Josh Allen. You explained it all. He's the perfect combination of passing ability with a lively arm that can find his receivers while also putting up double-digit rushing touchdowns. I mean, 15 rushing touchdowns. Like, we need to take a second and just at least express how absurdly high that is for a quarterback. And as you said at the beginning, in a changing landscape of fantasy quarterbacks and stuff, granted, there were some injuries and stuff this year to some pretty key quarterbacks, but there is if there's ever a year that we need to look back on to prove the premium of quarterback rushing touchdowns, this year, right? You have 2 quarterbacks, a little foreshadowing for one of the other quarterbacks we're going to talk about, with 15 rushing touchdowns, and then you've got a whole bunch of other ones that have 3, 4, and 5. But because of the 15 rushing touchdowns, they separated themselves from everyone else.
Yeah, and I mean, you even look at Josh Allen's total fantasy points. Like, yes, those rushing touchdowns definitely help because it wasn't down near in again, the touchdown interception ratio department for him. But I mean, 410 fantasy points this year. Last year, he was at 412. He was a quarterback 2 in 2021. He was at 417, and in 2020, he only had 405. So really, like, it's not even it wasn't like a Josh Allen kind of lucked his way into the top spot. Like, he consistently putting up 410 plus fantasy points every single year. He just did it in a slightly different way this year by, tacking on, 6, 7 more rushing touchdowns this year. So he's phenomenal. He's going to continue to be great for fantasy football. He's going to be my quarterback 1 going into next year, is in dynasty formats. And let's move on to the guy who was rivaling him this year. I will say with Josh Allen too, the Bills kind of have their own variation of like the tush push. It's not the tush push, right? It's definitely not the same thing. And Josh Allen, I don't think benefited as much as Jalen Hurts did from such a play. But just to keep in mind, like, they did start to use Josh Allen a little bit more in that way this year. That's why we saw that spike. But we'll move on to the guy who, is the king of the tush push, and that is Jalen Hurts at quarterback 2. Ty, give us the good, the bad, the ugly here.
I think a lot of people, when they think of Jalen Hurts, they think of kind of the disappointing season that was the Philadelphia Eagles. But despite the poor performances, the inconsistencies of the team, Jalen Hurts was yet another elite option in fantasy football. He had 13 games with 20 or more fantasy points. He tied with Josh Allen with 15 rushing touchdowns, and that's the third straight year with double-digit rushing touchdowns. I think it's gone 10, 13, and 15 now. That's really about all the good. And again, like,
it's quarterback 2 still.
He's the quarterback 2. Yeah, like,
which I think is a phenomenal feat given all the bad and ugly that you're about to go through here.
Yeah. There's not so much of there was not a whole lot of ugly, but there was some bad, and I think the bad sounds bad. Ha ha ha. I think it's just more so disappointments or some frustrations that happened during the year. There was a significant decrease in the big plays in this Philly offense. 2022, Jalen Hurts' deep ball completion percentage was 42.4, which I believe was top 5 on the year. This year, it dropped by 10 points, 32.4%. And that was still pretty middle of the pack. But for what we had just gone through in 2022, that's a significant step back. But then the other part of this is that Jalen Hurts was 28th in catchable pass rate, which is not great. He was 9th with over 80% last year, and he's down to 72.5% this year. So we can sit here and say, maybe Jalen Hurts isn't as great of a quarterback as we thought he was based off of last year. But I really just think that it comes down to this offense just was not well designed, well structured, anything like that. And again, you don't really see that in the fantasy points, right. But it's something to take into account going into next year. And they're going through another offensive coordinator change. Who did they bring in? Oh, they brought in Kellen Moore. Yeah. So,
he at least knows how to run a functional offense. Right. I think that was the massive problem with the Philadelphia Eagles this year is, oh my gosh, what offense are they running?
Right.
You look at some of the plays out there, and it was not set up for Jalen Hurts to succeed as a passer whatsoever. Mm-mm. So really, like, he finished as a quarterback 2 because he gets it done with his legs, because he scores rushing touchdowns.
Yep.
It goes to show just how overpowered these mobile quarterbacks are in fantasy football and how much ground they can make up, even if they're struggling in the passing game.
Yeah. And again, the 15 rushing touchdowns also makes up for the fact that he had a career high 15 interceptions on the year. It was again, from a fantasy perspective, Jalen Hurts was the same guy that we had seen in the year before. But when you look at it on the field and you look at it from an efficiency perspective, we saw a decrease, and I'm just glad that we are not, docked any points when it comes to efficiency metrics or anything like that. Because if we did, Jalen Hurts would be much, much, much lower on this list.
Let's move on. We'll keep it rolling here. The quarterback 3 on the year was Dak Prescott of the Dallas Cowboys. The good, the bad, and the ugly of Dak. I'll be honest. I'll say this up front. There really wasn't a lot of bad from Dak. It was either a year of greatness or a year of ugliness. Because the good, the great, from week 6 on, he was a quarterback 1 overall. 3,455 yards. That was 300 more than second place Jared Goff during that stretch. 31 touchdowns. That was 7 more than second best Jordan Love. Only threw 5 interceptions. That was 26th of all quarterbacks to play during that stretch. He was a quarterback 1 fantasy points per game as well. 24.1 points per game he averaged. He only had 4 finishes outside of the top 7 quarterbacks during that stretch. In 7 of those 8 games, he was a top 3 quarterback. I mean, Dak got it done for you. He was the definition of a second half league winner, a league winner in general for you on the season. Now we're going to get to the ugly, because it was an atrocious start to the year for Dak Prescott in weeks 1 through 5. It was literally a tale of 2 halves for him after the bye week. Quarterback 29, quarterback 17, quarterback 18, quarterback 19, quarterback 25. The quarterback 21 overall in the first 5 weeks of the season, only threw 6 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. So it truly was a tale of 2 seasons for Dak Prescott. And if you had him in the second half of the season, I know I benefited from it. I don't mean to bring it up. It's just the reality of the situation. Just to provide an example, Dak Prescott won you your league this year if he was your quarterback in the second half of the season. We're talking about a guy who was finding himself on the waiver wire. He was a waiver wire consideration, if not already on the waiver wire after the first 5 weeks of the season. And my gosh, if you picked him up, if you managed to get him, I don't know who was going out and trading for Dak Prescott at that point. But if you had him on your team second half of the season, that dude did wonders. He turned your season around. He won you a championship because he was the best fantasy football quarterback in the second half of the season. Josh Allen was a close second, but Dak Prescott was absolutely balling the second half of the year.
I'm just so done talking about the Dallas Cowboys at this point. Because again, I'll say it.
They've hurt you too many ways this year. They have hurt you in too many ways. Brandon Aubrey was your only saving grace.
Well, and he was, because I mean, I had the Dallas defense, and you couldn't play them the last 6 weeks of the season because they're going up against like some of the best offenses in the league. Best offenses. But like this team, they clearly built their offense around the passing game. Clearly did. And I'm interested to see what they do this offseason. Tony Pollard is a free agent, so do they double down on the passing game? Do they bring in another weapon for Dak Prescott? We saw Jake Ferguson take a step this year. I was going back through last year's draft. Luke Schoonmaker, tight end out of Michigan. He was a second round pick, so there's draft capital there. Obviously CeeDee Lamb. We've talked about CeeDee Lamb before. Michael Gallup hasn't really been cutting it after signing his extension. Brandon Cooks is getting up there in age, but they could probably all stay on the team, and Dallas could still go get another young or another stud wide receiver. We'll see what happens. But look, I'm sick and tired of talking about this Cowboys team because, like you said, I've been burned in too many ways, and I am beyond, asking for or giving any kind of forgiveness, asking for whatever. I'm just done with it. We need to move on.
We can move on. I won't add any more onto Dak Prescott. I will say for 2024, go ahead.
Do you remember the GOAT WNBA team of all time, the Minnesota Lynx?
Oh, yeah.
Every other year. San Francisco Giants in baseball every other year. Here we go. Dak Prescott, 2019.
There we go.
Passing touchdowns. 2021, 37 passing touchdowns. 2023, 36 passing touchdowns. Woohoo! 2020, 9 passing touchdowns in just 5 games. In 2022, 12 games and 23 passing touchdowns with a career high in interceptions. So maybe we get it down here from Dak next year, because clearly the even years just are not favorable for him.
I will say that was the point I was going to bring up. Is I think even though Dak finished this high this year, even though he closed out the season so strong, look, if his ADP shoots up next year, to be like a top 6 quarterback being drafted, I'm out. I want nothing to do with that next year. I think this was right place, right schedule, right time for Dak this year. And he absolutely benefited from it. He absolutely feasted on it. And so did your fantasy teams. So let's move on, Ty. We don't have to talk about the Cowboys anymore. Let's talk about someone who is very, very fun to watch. It's actually a shame we're not going to be able to watch him in the Super Bowl this year. But Lamar Jackson, the Baltimore Ravens, got his contract this offseason, finishes as a quarterback 4 in fantasy football this year. Let's do it. The good, the bad, the ugly.
The good is we witnessed and benefited from an MVP season from Lamar Jackson. And it was his best season as a passer, either the most or best, depending on the stat: completions, passing attempts, completion percentage, passing yards. And he was top 5 in pressure completion percentage, not phased by pressure. He was top 5 in true passer rating, top 5 in pretty much every single rushing metric you could look at. Like I said, it was an MVP season for Lamar, and it was different than his, what season was that? 2019? Was that his MVP year?
Yes, I believe it was.
I'm going to double check that because it was 2019. This year was a little bit different because it was more through the air than it was anything on the ground. But we're nitpicking. It was an MVP year for Lamar.
Yep.
The bad, we only saw 5 rushing touchdowns, and actually on the year between passing and rushing, there was only 29 combined touchdowns out of Lamar, which really isn't that bad, right? 5 rushing touchdowns is actually a pretty decent number for a quarterback. But I think when you think Lamar, and then you also see that Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts are putting at 15, you're like, we couldn't get 8, we couldn't get like 7. So again, like it's not so much it wasn't bad, but it was something that you're just like, man, like just 2 more, please. Like that's all we ask. And the ugly, there really isn't anything. The only thing that I really found was that there was a 3-week stretch during the season where he had 15 or less fantasy points. He went 12, 11 and a half, and 15, but that was in the middle of the season. I doubt that it sunk your team or anything like that. But yeah, I mean, Lamar Jackson, MVP on the year. I'm kind of expecting Baltimore to kind of be the same next year. It doesn't look like Todd Monken is going anywhere.
No.
If anything, they're probably going to get an upgrade at running back. You know, J.K. Dobbins is probably on his way out. Gus Edwards, well, I guess is just going to forever be there, but
he'll be a thing forever there.
I just think there is an opportunity now for Baltimore to kind of go out and really improve the rushing game. Not to say that it was bad this year, but I think with an improved rushing game, we could see probably even better efficiency out of Lamar. And for as efficient as he was this year, that can only mean good things moving forward.
So I will say, like specifically on the rushing touchdowns, the difference between a Josh Allen, a Jalen Hurts, and a Lamar Jackson in the rushing department is that when the Ravens get to the goal line, they don't give it to Lamar Jackson. They give it to Gus Edwards, who had 13 rushing touchdowns this year. How about that for a stat? Do you know he had 13 rushing touchdowns this year? That's absolutely stupid.
Gross.
Right. So that's the difference, right? Because you could say, like, just give 3 of those to Lamar. And if we give 3 of those to Lamar, we're talking about Lamar potentially being one of the top 3 quarterbacks drafted next year. And he's probably I should probably check ADP over on Underdog Fantasy right now. They have the little board and big board drafts out already for the offseason for the 2024 season. Pro Fells, if you want to go hop in at any of those, I've already drafted like 3 teams over there. I'm not addicted. That's the difference here. And Lamar, like you talked about Lamar, like only 29 total touchdowns, but you look at his passing touchdowns, 24 passing touchdowns is right in the range of where you would expect him to be. I don't think we're going to get a 36 2019 season from Lamar, like we did, but I mean, he had 26 in 2020 and, from 16, 17 to 24 this year. Like, I think that's where we're going to see Lamar right around for his whole career, somewhere between 24 to 28 touchdowns in the passing department every year. And he should give you another somewhere between 6 to 8 on the ground. Like I think that's a fair expectation from Lamar every season. And I think that's going to always then keep him, in this top 5 or top, 6 to 3 range every single year. And there's not much more I can really add on top of that. I want to talk about quarterback who comes in at number 5 now. This one makes me it makes me feel a lot of emotions. Angry is one of them. Part of me is also like happy for Jordan Love. Part of me it's the battle between me as a football fan and me as a Minnesota Vikings fan. Because I don't know how the Packers hit gold on another freaking quarterback. But Jordan Love was quarterback 5 in fantasy football this year, and that's the good. The good is the simple fact that this man went undrafted, and he was a quarterback 5 this year. Like, that just doesn't happen. Like, even when we talk about guys like Daniel Jones, right, who finished top 10 last year, guys like Josh Allen, when they did it for the first time, like, they were all at least going, late rounds, 10th, 12th round. Jordan Love wasn't even being drafted this year. He was 7th in passing yards, 5th in passing attempts, 2nd in air yards, 2nd in passing touchdowns of all quarterbacks this year. I mean, he had a phenomenal season. He had a phenomenal season as his first season as a full-time starter with the Green Bay Packers. Now, the bad, I don't know how much bad there really was. I mean, you look at there was only 3 games with less than 15 fantasy points this year. Only 5 games with less than 18 fantasy points for Jordan Love this year. So we're talking, in 12 of 18 games, this guy was scoring at least 18 fantasy points. And the ugly, excuse me, if you really want to call it an ugly, I mean, he threw 3 picks in week 5 against Vegas, but look, after the week 6 bye, he got right because he was a quarterback 4 overall for the rest of the season, averaging 19.5 fantasy points per game. So Jordan Love, I mean, this was just a phenomenal season from him. I'm really happy for the guy, but me as a Minnesota Vikings fan is like, how in the world did the Green Bay Packers hit on their 3rd straight quarterback? And now that's not saying Jordan Love is going to go on to be an all-timer, but I mean, you look at his stats compared to Aaron Rodgers in their first full years as a starter, Jordan Love looks the part. He looks everything about the part that the Green Bay Packers would hope he would be, wanted him to be. I think all they needed him to be was less than what he was this year. There really wasn't a lot of bad or ugly from Jordan Love this year. He had his moments where he clearly looked like the first-year starter for the team, but what a phenomenal season for Jordan Love. I'll leave it at that, and I'll let you chime in.
I think a lot of it was very much in the early part of the season about, Jordan Love isn't the guy. We're probably going to need to look elsewhere next year, because before week 11, right? I should say, after the Vegas game that was in week 5 going into their week 6 bye, there were 2-3, and there was maybe one game that he looked the part. Everything else was kind of iffy. But then he comes back in the next 4 weeks. They go 1-3. So then it got really loud after that. But then week 11 against the Chargers, something turned, something clicked, and he didn't look back. I mean, from week 11 until week 18, he was the quarterback 2 in fantasy football. He had 18 touchdowns, 18 passing touchdowns to 1 interception. And I'm pretty sure he led in passing yards. He did. He led in passing yards over that stretch as well. Like, something clicked for Jordan Love, right? And I think a lot of people might be quick to say, like, well, it's probably, that there's a lot of recency bias with Jordan Love at this point. And it's like, no, like,
He's just playing good football.
He's been playing good football, right? And if you are, of the football mind, you do give players like a chance to kind of like exponentially grow a little bit, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like, it starts out slow and then they kind of ramp up a little bit in terms of production. That's what happened, right? And we saw it in full strength in the playoffs against Dallas. And I think Jordan Love feels like he's going to have this forever debate of like, was it really him? Was it LaFleur? Was it the running game? All that kind of stuff. And it's like, doesn't matter when it comes to fantasy. The guy, 18 passing touchdowns over the last 8 weeks of the season. Like, I don't think there's much of a conversation when it comes to fantasy football for Jordan Love going into next year. The guy's going to be good. The guy's only going to get better going into his second year as the starter, as the full-time starter. It's only going to get better, I have to think. And if it doesn't, well, then we know. But what he showed at the end of this year makes us worried as Vikings fans, and it makes us hate it because, man, he looked good.
It looks really good. It's going to be a real conversation next year of where does Jordan Love go in the realms of Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow, Justin Fields, CJ Stroud in that mix now. Who else am I missing? There's someone else in that tier. Trevor Lawrence isn't there anymore, but it's going to be that group of quarterbacks, right? That we failed to see a full season from, that still possess, the elite talent to lead their team. Where does Jordan Love fall in that mix? And frankly, I listed off a few of those names. Jordan Love is going to be right in the thick of that, and I think he's going to be the least popular one, and he's going to be my favorite quarterback to draft out of them, I think.
Yeah, it's my debate that I can't wait to have going into next year is Anthony Richardson or Jordan Love.
Yeah, that'll be there we go. Anthony Richardson is the other one we should throw into that mix too with his rushing ability. Tyler, take a quick break. We covered 5. We still got 7 more to cover, but let's take a quick break here from our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. We'll be right back. Today's podcast episode is brought to you by our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. Now, we love Underdog. It is the easiest place to play best ball formats, and they even have their own form of player props called Pick'em. You can make up to 20 times your money on a single night by correlating props together. 2 picks will triple your money, 3 will 6 times it, 4 will 10 times it, and 5 plays that all hit will multiply your entry by 20. You can even place insurance on your picks too, so if only 4 of your 5 props hit, you still get 10 times your entry. And if you use our code FELLAS when signing up, Underdog is going to double your first deposit up to $100. Alrighty, we are back. We are going to finish covering the top 12 quarterbacks from fantasy football this year, the way they might have actually changed the landscape of fantasy football forever. Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Dak Prescott, Lamar Jackson, Jordan Love have already been covered. Ty, let's cover the last 7 now. Moving on to quarterback 6 on the year, Brock Purdy of the San Francisco 49ers. At one point, the MVP favorite, potentially Super Bowl champ, Brock Purdy. Let's talk about him, Ty. The good, the bad, the ugly, because he was a quarterback 6 this year, and he did a lot of things right this year.
The game manager himself, Brock
there
Purdy.
It is.
Had to throw it in there. Look, again, MVP front runner most of the year. Probably the runner up after how everything played out towards the end of the year, but Brock Purdy, first in yards per attempt, first in air yards per attempt, in deep completion percentage, in play action completion percentage, true passer rating, QBR, expected points added.
Which is big. I think part of that you might contribute to the 49ers offense, but again, this is where we're like, Purdy did a lot of things right. This is where he's getting his credit. He did a lot of things right this year.
Yeah. He was, he was exactly what the offense needed. And, when it comes to quarterbacks in fantasy football, you get points for yards, touchdowns. Because they put up a ton of yards, scored a ton of points, Brock Purdy is going to benefit from it. The bad for Brock Purdy, there were just some, I think it's, again, more indicative on the team and in the situation than it was anything that it had to do with him, right? He was 22nd in deep attempts, 20th in total pass attempts. It's because first, the San Francisco offense goes through Christian McCaffrey. Let's not forget about that guy. But then they would also get up so big and so quick. They didn't need Purdy to throw the ball a ton. There were plenty of games where the guy is only throwing 26, 27, 28 pass attempts a game because they're relying so heavily on Christian McCaffrey, but because they're also winning by so much. The other thing that I found, he was top 5 in passing yards. So you're like, well, that's not bad. That's great. Thing is, though, he's 16th in air yards. So he's middle of the pack, which tells me right away, like, his receivers were helping him out quite a bit. And that, again, like, we're nitpicking at that point, but I did some handy dandy stat looking up and didn't have time
looking
to
up on an opened envelope.
On an open envelope.
For those who are listening to the audio podcast.
If you can hear that, that's an envelope.
There it is.
But of the top 12 quarterbacks this year in fantasy football, and I even looked at top 15, there were only 3 quarterbacks that ranked or that had more than 4 yards in receiver yak, yards after catch per target. Russell Wilson, Patrick Mahomes, and Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy led them all with nearly 4.75. Mahomes was at 4.45. Russ was 4.3 something. But everyone else was a full yard less than Purdy. So, again, we're nitpicking at this point, and I think that's where the game manager and game changer debate really came into play, is because Brock Purdy, didn't need to do a whole lot, didn't need to throw it deep, didn't need the big play from his arm. His receivers made it happen for him. But guess what? In fantasy, it doesn't matter. You only get points for the passing yards. And because they racked up yards, he got credit for it. And ugly then for Brock Purdy, he had 3 games on the year with less than 11.5 fantasy points, but they were so spaced out during the year. it didn't really matter that much. So look, again, Brock Purdy, borderline top 5 quarterback this year. There was a good stretch where he was in the top 5 fantasy quarterbacks. There's not much that we can say that that negatively impacts or reflects on Brock Purdy.
I mean, he did have like a phenomenal fantasy season. I mean, you look at the 20-point games. I mean, he had 3 different stretches where he strung you 3 games in a row of 20 plus fantasy points at 3 different points throughout the year. The problem was at the end of those, he would always hit you with a stinker, right? You look at it 20.3, 21.3, 26.1 in weeks 3 to 5, 8.7, 20.3, 23.8, 26.7, 11.5. That was weeks 8 through 12. And then really when it mattered the most, 29.5, 22.4, 25.7. He was balling out. Brock Purdy looked like he was about to win you your fantasy football league this year. He looked like he might have leaped Dak Prescott, right? As the biggest league winner from this past year. But what do you know? Week 16, when you need it the most to get to the fantasy championship, Brock Purdy gives you 6.4 fantasy points. So, yeah, that is truly the ugly to Brock Purdy's year. Otherwise, it was a stellar year from Brock Purdy. And this is coming from the guy who, from the get-go, has been the biggest anti-Brock Purdy person on the planet, debatably. Everyone's saying, oh, the next Brady. Oh, he's going to be so good. He's going to be the next GOAT. Of course, he's going to win out the starting job. He's like, holy smokes. This guy is he's a perfectly good NFL quarterback. He is a good NFL quarterback. Can we just leave it at that? He could be good for fantasy, but this guy is a good NFL quarterback. He's also playing in a system that incredibly benefits him. Let's not get it twisted, okay? Because you put Brock Purdy on the Houston Texans. Let's swap CJ Stroud and Brock Purdy. Do you know how good CJ Stroud would be in the San Francisco 49ers offense? I mean, it is not even comparable. So let's not get it twisted. Brock Purdy is a perfectly good NFL quarterback, but he does benefit from a Kyle Shanahan system that is hyper efficient and does benefit the game manager a little bit because he doesn't need a guy who can sling it all around the yard. But let's keep it moving, Ty, because we have handful of more quarterbacks to talk about here. Quarterback 7 on the year, Jared Goff, the Detroit Lions. Good, the bad, and the ugly here. The good is that you know when to play Jared Goff because he absolutely feasts in home games and on bad defenses as well. At home this year, he was averaging 21.3 fantasy points per game. And against bottom half defenses this year, he was averaging nearly 24 fantasy points per game. So when Jared Goff plays a bad team, or he plays at home, and if he plays a bad team at home, you better start Jared Goff. Okay, that is a science that is now proven, has now happened in back-to-back years, which honestly, as much as that's a good, that's also a bad because you cannot trust Jared Goff as an every week starter in fantasy. You look at the quarterback 7 and you're like, man, you know what? I should have been able to trust him almost every week this year. I mean, let me just read you his weekly finishes just so you know how inconsistent this was. Quarterback 18 in week 1, 6, 14, 21, 4, 4, 24, 20, 8, 16, 11, 14, 25, 1, 23, 24, 6. I mean, you are all over the yard there for Jared Goff. He could not string you 2 good weeks in a row, except for when he was the quarterback 4 in back-to-back weeks. He's too inconsistent. And the ugly is that it's the same thing every year with Jared Goff. You cannot trust him on the road because he averaged only 15.4 fantasy points per game on the road this year. That is the story of Jared Goff, is if he's at home or playing a bad defense, you can fire him up. If it's a bad defense on the road, you got to bake in a little bit of risk there. But if he's at home, regardless of the defense, or it's a bad team at home that he plays, Jared Goff is a must start. That is the proven science because we have gotten it in back-to-back years now, and that is the good, the bad, the ugly of Jared Goff, is that he's good at home. The bad is that you can't trust him because he doesn't play at home every week, and the ugly is that he just sucks on the road. Case in point. Is there even anything? I don't even want to get into the advanced analytics there because Jared Goff is like the average of all average of quarterbacks. He's a fine quarterback. I shouldn't say average. That sounds a little bit too harsh, but Jared Goff is a perfectly fine, good NFL quarterback. I would say he's a better quarterback than Brock Purdy in the NFL right now. Maybe that's a hot take, but I for fantasy football purposes, sorry, I can't trust the guy at all whatsoever. Unless if he's at home against a bad defense, then I'm firing him up no matter what. Quarterback 1 on the week.
He was the quarterback 15 of fantasy points per game. And I think the only reason why he's this high in the top 12 quarterbacks, and again, we're talking about the quarterback 7, so we're like halfway through, but is just because he stayed healthy throughout the year.
He was healthy. Yes. That's the story with half of these quarterbacks.
Yeah. Like it wasn't, yes, he gave you some really good weeks, but the inconsistency is what let you down. And Jared Goff's finish is kind of a little bit of a facade, in my opinion, because I don't think he won you anything this year.
No. You look at how many teams had Jared Goff, in the semifinals, championship round of their playoffs. Jared Goff was not on them, right? Like, I don't think Jared Goff won you anything this year. Yeah, you couldn't trust Jared Goff this year. So that's the good, the bad, the ugly of Jared Goff. That's what you have to hold on to going into next year. It's gonna be the same song and dance next year. I really don't think that changes because this is now the second straight year that we have seen that really science kind of pan out to perfection.
I'm glad. So I'm just looking at the Underdog pre-draft best ball big board.
Little and big board drafts. Only $3 to enter the little board. That's why I'm just smashing those.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Prizes aren't as big, but
he's going as a quarterback 16. Perfect.
I mean, I feel like that's about where he should be.
That's
somewhere
where he
between
should be.
14 and 16.
And obviously best ball is not the same as redraft, all that kind of stuff, but he's the perfect number 2 quarterback option for your best ball teams because you benefit from the good weeks. But then if you get someone before him, you're covered. So Jared Goff, great number 2 option, but you cannot bank on him as your guy or the guy for your quarterbacks.
Let's keep it moving here, Ty, because I think we should spend a little bit of time on the quarterback 8 this year. That was the number 1 overall quarterback drafted this year. Patrick Mahomes of the Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl now, but for fantasy football, I don't want to call him a train wreck this year.
He's a bum. He's a bum.
He's one of my least favorite picks this year. I'll tell you that. I had 0 shares of Patrick Mahomes in my fantasy football leagues this year. Look, the good, the bad, and the ugly here. Let's just start with the good, and let's compliment him on that, and then we'll dive into the bad and the ugly because there was a lot of that from Patrick Mahomes this year.
Yeah. Let's start with the good with Patrick Mahomes. He had ample opportunity this year, second in team pass plays per game, and he was first in true completion percentage. So hey, good on
him. He was accurate this year.
That's it.
Is that it?
That's really about it.
You can go ahead and dive into the bad and the ugly. I mean, I honestly, I'm pulling up his profile here, but I honestly, off the top of my head, don't have much to add because I think this was a year of disappointment for Patrick Mahomes. Oh gosh, yeah. Well, yeah. Go ahead, name all the bad and the ugly because this was a year of disappointment. There's not much to celebrate here for Mahomes, even though he's a quarterback 8.
Yeah. Look, he's the quarterback 12 in fantasy points per game after going as the quarterback 1 overall in drafts this year. Lowest passing yards and touchdowns since 2019. Most interceptions since 2018. 0 rushing touchdowns.
How many did he have in previous seasons? Never mind.
It's like
I don't know why I asked that. Yeah,
so,
he's got 2. Yeah, he's consistently had 2, except for last year he had 4. But it kind of sucks when you don't get those extra 12 points.
Exactly. But then, this is not his fault or anything, but his wide receivers didn't really do him any favors. Most dropped passes of any quarterback this year. But then the other thing, he was top 12 in danger plays and interceptable passes on the year. Which is, I mean, you kind of expect that, right? If you're
right.
If you're throwing the ball as much as Kansas City did, right, you're going to have a higher risk of those kind of plays. So again, not so much of a Patrick Mahomes specific problem, but it could have been worse. I'll just say that it could have been worse.
I mean, and like we talked about with Josh Allen, you want a quarterback who drives the ball downfield, who does take chances. Like that is a sign of a good NFL quarterback, in my opinion. But I also don't think it's. Yeah, it's also at least worth noting.
Yeah, and then the ugly, and oh man, this is going to be fun. Only one quarterback one weekly finish on the year. Only one. Only
Had to sneak
one.
that in there.
You had to. Only one top 10 finish the last 8 weeks of the season. He had more games with less than 19 fantasy points than with 19 or more. Ready for this? 6 games with 19 or more fantasy points. 11 games with less than 19 fantasy points.
I mean, it was not a good year for Mahomes by
Nope.
any stretch of the imagination.
He's a quarterback 8 because he stayed healthy and didn't miss a game this year. That's the only reason why. I mean, looking at fantasy points per game, Justin Herbert, Kyler Murray, CJ Stroud, Kirk Cousins, Joe Flacco.
Oh, not Flacco. Oh,
Flacco.
no. Oh, Flacco.
And get this too. Technically, we could say that Mahomes is actually the quarterback 14 in fantasy points per game. He tied with Justin Fields and Anthony Richardson.
Oh, no. He only played 4 games.
It was a season to forget. He let you down. He let you down this year, and I think your team probably suffered from it. I know best ball.
Oh,
It was very popular to go Kelsey Mahomes stack first 2 rounds. That duo
sunk you almost single-handedly. Those teams, I could have drafted perfect everywhere else, and that duo alone just sunk me.
Yep. Where do we even start now with Mahomes moving forward? I'll start with this.
Let's play name game. You can play. You can lead it. I'll give the answer.
Because this is your idea. I don't know which way you want to go with this.
Who are you drafting next year? Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes?
Josh Allen.
Jalen Hurts or Patrick Mahomes?
If they ban the tush push, Mahomes. But if the tush push stays, I'm going Hurts.
I don't think they're going to ban the tush push. I still think that's stupid that they're considering that. It's an NFL play. Figure out how to stop it.
So I'll go
It's
Hurts.
part of the NFL. Figure out how to stop it. Okay, they're not going to ban it. I would take Jalen Hurts as well. Lamar Jackson or Patrick Mahomes?
Lamar.
Then it gets interesting, I think.
Yep.
Because then you have a ton of people that you consider for this quarterback 4.
Yep.
Do we still consider Justin Herbert in that range?
He's probably going to be a little. I wouldn't, just because I feel like there's going to be so much change and turnover in LA, right? You got Harbaugh coming in. You're probably going to have one of Keenan Allen or Mike Williams walk out the door. I would still go Mahomes there, but I can understand the thought process because Herbert is an immense talent.
I mean, you look at, through the first 11 weeks of the season, Herbert was a quarterback 3 overall behind Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts. So I think he's still going to be in that range.
Mm-hmm.
We'll throw Dak Prescott in. I'm taking Mahomes over Dak.
Yep. But
Joe Burrow, if he comes back. Well, go ahead.
Burrow. I was just going to say, like, I keep looking at these names. I keep looking at the Jordan Loves. I look at the CJ Strouds. I look at the Anthony Richardson, the Justin Fields of the world, right? And I'm like, well, I think you would say on the surface, at face value, Mahomes. But if Mahomes is going, I don't know, 3rd round, 4th round in drafts, but some of those guys are going like 6, 7, 8, 9, I honestly might wait. I might honestly wait.
I know. I mean, 100%. I would take the value out of all those guys because I don't know what Mahomes is going to give me. I just don't.
Right.
I shouldn't say I don't. I know what Mahomes is going to give me. He's going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. But after this year, like, I'm not drafting him top 2, not drafting him top 3. Maybe fourth, but there's a lot of
it's
guys you could convince me of there. If he goes 4, I'd rather just wait on the value of a guy like a Jordan Love, on the value of a guy like a Justin Fields, a Justin Herbert.
Mhm.
That's where I'm at.
Yep. I agree.
Let's keep moving because we only got like 10, 12 minutes here to wrap up our last 4 guys here. Let's go. Quarterback 9. Tua Tagovailoa. Now, here we go. You ready for this? Tua Tagovailoa is just Jared Goff Lite. You think I'm joking? I'm not.
No, I just can't wait. I really hope Dolphins fans hear that, because I can't wait to see the reaction out of him, because you are 1000% right.
He's Jared Goff Lite because Tua Tagovailoa at home this year, 17.6 fantasy points per game. On the road, 15.75. Okay, Jared Goff, as we talked about at home this year, 21.3 fantasy points per game and 15.4 on the road. So Tua, first and foremost, isn't as good at home as Jared Goff is. But why is that? It's because he can't play good teams or bad defenses. He absolutely stinks.
Get him.
Look, against Buffalo, 15 fantasy points this year, 9.6 fantasy points. Philadelphia, 11.3. Kansas City, 12.4. The New York Jets, 9.8 and 13. The Dallas Cowboys, 15.5. The Baltimore Ravens, 16.9. The man can't play a good NFL team. He can't rise up in the moment. So while he plays better at home, you know what? It's like Jared Goff. If Tua Tagovailoa is playing a good or bad defense at home, Tua Tagovailoa is a locked top 5 quarterback on the week. But if he's on the road or playing any team, no matter where the location is, Tua, it's infuriating for how good this offense looks. And then when they play bad or good defenses, it's a disgrace how bad Tua is. Tua is just Jared Goff like. That is 100% the facts. They are both on this tier of 12th best quarterback in the NFL, somewhere in that range. But man, you know what? On the road, they cannot get it done. And Tua against a good NFL defense disappears. Cannot make anything happen. So that's it. That's my case on Tua Tagovailoa being Jared Goff Lite. For fantasy football, the ugly, I mean, you literally could have played Tua the second half of the season. That's the ugly. From week 11 on, he averaged only 14 fantasy points per game. He was a quarterback 12, 26, 10, 23, 23, 22, 16, 24. He was unplayable, period. End of discussion. So Tua Tagovailoa, probably one of the most overrated quarterbacks in the NFL in my eyes. And frankly, yes, he plays in a great system, but man, he can just not get it done when he needs to rise to the occasion against good teams to win football games. It's a disgrace. It truly is.
Look, we get to have fun on this podcast talking about football and stuff.
Okay, people are going to say I did that for clicks. I 100% believe that. Tell me where in the numbers it doesn't say that. I'm sorry. Yeah, this is a season worth criticizing for Tua. When Tyreek Hill was on pace for 2,000 yards, and you can't rise to the occasion and lift your team to a first round exit against the Chiefs. I get the Chiefs are in the Super Bowl and they're good, but come on, you've got to be better than this, Tua. You have got to be better than this with the system, the wide receivers, with how good your run game is, with how good the Miami Dolphins defense played in the second half of the season. A first-round exit because you can't rise to the occasion? It's a disgrace. It is a disgrace. I'm going to grab my hat. You can add what you want.
2 things. One, as much criticism as Tua deserves, Mike McDaniel also deserves some criticism, okay? Because
I won't leave him out of it. You're right.
Here's the thing, right? Tua, with how efficient this offense is, you would expect a better season out of him. Yes?
100%.
But someone has to answer for the fact that Raheem Mostert has 18 rushing touchdowns. And you had Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill.
I mean, the run game was clicking.
It was clicking. It was clicking. But the thing is, are we sure we want to have the offense run the way that it was this year? Because for as many people that thought that this was the year, that this was how Miami is going to be moving forward and that they are going to be one of the better teams, the way that it all played out this year resulted in a first round exit in the playoffs. Okay. So maybe there's some improvements to be made that Mike McDaniel can make, but this offense is not as good as I think a lot of people think it is. And the other thing then, okay, Austin Lyman of Athletes First. He's a sports agent. He currently represents Tua. He has the most difficult job this offseason because he has to try and sell Tua to Miami to be as the franchise quarterback. Because Tua
you could throw Brock Purdy in Miami, and I think they might have avoided a first round exit. I'm going to be perfectly honest.
They're probably still alive at this point.
I think they are.
So Austin Lyman, I don't know who you are, but you seem like a good guy because you're representing your athlete. Brother, I do not wish to be you this offseason because trying to negotiate that extension for Tua is going to be difficult. And if you can, it's an absolute heist because I don't know if there's anything that Tua has done to to make people feel assured that he's the guy.
We both feel very similarly about Tua. Let's move on. Let's wrap up the top 12 here.
You ready? Hold on. You ready for this one though? Just a little fun exercise. I know that we're running out of time, but
yeah.
Where would Miami be if Kirk Cousins was their quarterback?
Oh gosh. Oh my. I'll tell you what, they wouldn't have been. I don't think they would have been a first round exit. I think they could have beaten the Chiefs.
I rest my case.
I think they could have beaten the Chiefs. I don't want to say the loss against the Chiefs isn't only on Tua. Look, and that's not even to discredit the Chiefs. Okay, the Chiefs are playing phenomenal defense right now. Okay, they deserve to be in the Super Bowl. But what a pitiful performance by the Miami Dolphins as well. What a pitiful performance. All right, let's move on. We got to wrap up these top 12 quarterbacks here, Ty, and let's not spend too much time on Baker Mayfield because again, he and the quarterback 12 this year are beneficiaries of people who just quarterbacks miss time. And Baker coming in at the quarterback 10. I don't know. You can give us a good, the bad, and the ugly here, but I think that's about all it's worth talking about. We don't need to take a deep dive on this one.
You know how who was it that we were saying? Oh, Jordan Love. We were saying that people might come at it with a recency bias perspective. Baker Mayfield 1000% carries the recency bias label. Here's the good though for Baker, credit where credit's due. It was a career year for him. Highest completions, attempts, completion percentage, passing yards, touchdowns, you name it. Career year in those categories. He was first in deep attempts, third in air yards. So they're actually pushing the ball downfield, which is great. We saw some big plays out of it. We saw Mike Evans capitalize on most of those. He was top 10 in expected points added. He was the quarterback 6 from weeks 7 to 10, and he was the quarterback 3 from weeks 14 to 17. Recency bias tag is right there, right in front of you. So yes, career year for Baker Mayfield. The bad though is much deeper than just, hey, Baker led his team to a divisional title and a playoff win against Philly. Only 4 finishes with 20 or more fantasy points. He was 8th in danger plays, in interceptable passes. So the riskiness, I'll say recklessness, was still there with Baker, but for the first time, those plays didn't exactly turn into turnovers. But the ugly, he had 4 weeks with less than 13.3 fantasy points. Looking over his stats, advanced stats, all that stuff, and also just kind of watching games and stuff with Baker, there should be no multiple year extension for Baker in
No,
Tampa
there really
this
shouldn't.
offseason. There
No.
there should not. Not saying that Seattle is the example that they need to follow, but Geno Smith had a dramatic drop off in his efficiency and in production after signing his extension. Now, I will say, franchise tag is a great option for Baker because the thing is, you might not have Mike Evans next year. Dave Canales is out. So who knows
See
what
what
the
Baker
offense.
really, who Baker really is. Yeah.
Exactly. Right. This is what, and I should say, the better example that we should follow, at least with Baker in Tampa, isn't Seattle. It's Daniel Jones and the Giants. Right.
Sure.
Look at what the Giants did. Don't make that same mistake. Tag him, let him prove it one more year. And if he does, cool. Then don't rush into the extension at this point. So, look, again, career year for Baker. Good for him. I've always had a kind of a soft spot for Baker. I've always wanted him to succeed, and he did this year. But at the same time, it wasn't really anything spectacular. And he's taking, at least in the quarterback 10 finish in fantasy football, he's taking advantage of some outside external factors than his own performances.
Yeah, I mean, we're just not going to find Baker here again next year. It was a great year, phenomenal year for Baker. I really great story this year. I had a lot of fun watching Baker this year. He was having fun again, which is great. You love to see that, but the reality is that you're not going to see Baker again next year. He's just not good enough for fantasy to find himself here next year. And that's all we need to say, and we're going to move on. Because a guy who probably will find himself here again next year, and frankly, probably higher than the quarterback 11 is CJ Stroud. Because the good is that through the first 14 weeks prior to his injury, he was the quarterback 7 in fantasy football. He looked the part. CJ Stroud had a phenomenal NFL season this year. He had more fantasy points per game in that stretch than Jordan Love, Justin Herbert, Tua, Goff, guys who we already talked about. Justin Fields, he had more fantasy points per game than. CJ Stroud looked the part this year. He came out and was by far the best quarterback from this draft class. It was really fun to watch this year. He only had 5 interceptions on the year as well, which for a rookie quarterback, I think that's notable because he did a really good job protecting the football this year. He limited his turnovers exceptionally well for a rookie. I think that's noteworthy. Now, the bad, I mean, call it a bad if you want, but the problem, like, he, as good as he was NFL wise, he just wasn't stellar for fantasy football. He only had 5 games inside of the top 10 quarterbacks, only 3 games inside of the top 7. So, even though he's a quarterback 7 during that stretch, it wasn't a dominating performance where he was like putting himself in this upper tier. He was just good enough, right? He was good enough. And the ugly, I mean, this is to be expected for a rookie. Let me start with that caveat. But man, his completion percentages can definitely be improved on. Typically for a rookie, you're like, if we can hit 60, 61%, we can work with that. We can make something out of this in future years. So when I read all these numbers, keep in mind that these can be improved upon. This is a rookie quarterback we're talking about. So even though he was 5th in deep ball completion percentage this year, which is a phenomenal metric to see, but he was 19th in clean pocket completion percentage. He was 25th in pressured completion percentage, 26th in red zone, 28th in play action, 30th in true completion percentage. So there's just a lot to be improved on there with CJ Stroud. And if you really want to tack it on, he doesn't get a lot done with his legs, but that's not CJ Stroud's game. He's a pocket passer. So when we think of a pocket passer, I would like to see those completion percentages be a bit higher, but that can be improved upon. It was a rookie year for CJ Stroud, and all in all, it was a very, very good rookie year for CJ Stroud.
I have a ton of optimism for CJ Stroud going in the next year.
I do as well.
Bobby Slowick is staying in town. They're probably going to go out and add a more bona fide wide receiver than a Nico Collins and Tank Dell, and that's not a slight against them at all. No. But we've seen a trend with young quarterbacks in the past. Justin Fields and DJ Moore, Jalen Hurts and AJ Brown, and who was the other one before that? It was
Diggs and Allen.
I
mean, you got Tyreek and Tua even, but we saw how that worked out for Tua. So I also think that's a little bit different because Tyreek was already well into his prime with the Kansas City Chiefs. So I digress. Keep going.
They're gonna go get another weapon for CJ Stroud. That being said, though, Best ball drafts right now, and again, pre-draft best ball. He's going as a quarterback 5 right now. That's a little rich for my liking.
Yeah, it is. It is a little rich. I would agree with that.
Just a tad.
I'd be comfortable with quarterback 7 range, but I think quarterback 5
Yeah.
is a little rich for my blood.
So, but the thing is, like, I get why he's going that early.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So it was a fantastic season from CJ Stroud. Probably the rookie of the year. I mean, unless I'm forgetting. Sorry, I forgot about Puka.
I was going to say you got Puka in that conversation too, but
and that's my bad. That's my bad, guys. But CJ Stroud, I mean, before he got hurt, he was the rookie of the year, 1,000%.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to be optimistic for with CJ Stroud, and he'll be a top tier quarterback for years to come. A guy that you're going to want to start every single week, and he's going to turn into that. They're going to keep consistency around him there with Bobby Slowick in town still. If they add more weapons to him, go for it.
I have a new pipe dream for the Houston Texans. Okay.
Oh boy.
You have 2 first-round picks this year, right? One, what is it? One. Do you have 2? No, just one. Just
one.
If the Bengals franchise tag T. Higgins, you need to go make a trade for T. Higgins right then and there.
Yeah, see, I think T. Higgins, Houston would be I think it would be a very intriguing spot for T. Higgins. I agree with that.
That would be very nice. Very.
That'd be a lot of fun. I do think he should be the name that the Houston Texans are targeting in, if they do let him walk in free agency or in trade talks, if the Bengals do tag him. Yeah. So can we just say Sam Howell's a quarterback 12 this year and be done with it? I mean, okay, maybe we should acknowledge how phenomenal he was during the middle of the season. I should say phenomenal. How for fantasy football. How good he was for fantasy football in the middle of the season, but boy, it started off bad and ended even worse.
It was nice. It was good, and then it all burned down in flames. Look, I'll keep it short and sweet. He was the quarterback 4 from weeks 5 to 13. He averaged 21 fantasy points per game in that stretch. But then on the year, he had a 1-to-1 ratio of passing touchdowns to interceptions.
Is that Jameis Winston? Did someone just erase his name and put down Sam Howell instead of Jameis Winston? Is that what I just heard?
Exactly. And then weeks 15 to 18, right? He was getting benched, but then Jacoby Brissett is then getting hurt. He's still playing. He then put up less than 10 fantasy points in every game from week 15 to 18. Look, it was I hope some people took advantage of the good weeks that he had in the middle of the season. And then I hope
did on the betting markets.
Yeah, true. But then I told Lucas right before we started recording. I was like, hey, there's 32 NFL teams, 32 starting quarterbacks. How do we finish outside the top 32 quarterbacks in play action completion percentage?
I mean, all fairness, there were a lot of backup quarterbacks that played this year. I believe the number was we had somewhere near like 60 something quarterbacks take a snap in the NFL this year in the regular season.
Yeah. It was an absurd amount of backup quarterbacks.
That's how, but I also understand your point.
Sam Howell, your quarterback 12 on the year somehow, some way.
It's just ugly. Yeah, 66 played in the NFL this year, which is an abysmal number. So that's how. But still, even so, I think if you filtered out some of those names, it would still be abysmally low. What are you looking up now?
How did Flacco finish in play action completion percentage?
Oh, gosh.
Where did Flacco finish? That's my
Black Goat.
Black Goat.
Can we get a goat sound effect in here? That'll be our Joe Flacco drop.
Dude, brother was 17. He was second in deep ball completion percentage.
Attaboy, Joe, baby. Attababy, Joe.
Attaboy.
Joe Goat. Joe Flacco. There's my goat. There's my goat noise for you all.
Oh, man.
Oh, we need to wrap up this episode. We're getting off the rails here. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Fantasy Football Fellas podcast. Hey, if you're not subscribed to the podcast already, make sure you do that. We're appreciative of all your support over there. I know we're in the off season. Things are slowing down. We're going to be coming to you with Dynasty content very, very soon, both on YouTube and on the podcast. We're going to have one podcast a week. We're going to have one YouTube video a week. We still have shorts coming out, not quite every single day, but in total, you're going to have something almost every single day of the week to watch on our channel. So if you're seeing us over on YouTube, thanks for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe and turn on those notifications as well. Follow me on Twitter at Lucas Wencl, at Tyler Plath for Tyler. But if you want to follow the main pages as well, FF Fellas on Twitter, the FF Fellas on Instagram, Fantasy Football Fellas on Facebook and TikTok as well. We're going to be back. We're going to recap the top 12 tight ends. Hopefully that's a short episode next week. Golly, do we really have to talk about 12 tight ends next week? I don't want to talk about like 5. We'll be back next week. We're going to recap it because we're loyal and we're sticking to our schedule. But until then, stay safe, stay healthy. Thanks for tuning in. See y'all next time. Deuces.